It began on a dying world named Arathi 7, a planet once known for blue skies and silver mountains, now burning under the weight of war as red smoke choked the air and distant explosions shook the ground like angry giants beating drums beneath the soil, and every heartbeat of the planet echoed fear through the hearts of its remaining defenders. The Arathi people, known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature and shimmering crystal cities, had been reduced to frightened survivors hiding behind broken walls, their once beautiful structures now shattered like glass under the claws of the Dravix. The Dravix were monsters of legend, towering, armored creatures with glowing jaws and claws sharp enough to slice through steel plating, their roars vibrating through the air like thunder. They marched in endless numbers across the fields of Arathi 7, crushing everything beneath them, and no matter how many the Arathi soldiers faced, the monsters only multiplied, like a living hurricane tearing through the last hope of a dying world. The defenders had already lost 3 continents, 6 capital cities, and more than half their army. Every communication tower played the same desperate message on loop. Please send help, any world, any species, please, we are dying. But only the Galactic Council responded, and their message was short, cold, frustratingly calm: backup is coming. The words felt like a cruel joke. The Arathi generals argued among themselves. Backup? From who? The Council had been avoiding this war for months. The neighboring star systems had already sealed their borders. No major galactic power wanted to get involved with the Dravix, because fighting the Dravix meant losing ships, losing soldiers, losing pride. So when the Council said backup, no one believed it. Some thought a weak scout fleet would come. Others thought maybe 2 medical ships would arrive to rescue survivors. But no one in their wildest nightmares or hopes, believed that the Council would send humans. Humans, the apex predators of the galaxy. Humans, the species the Council had banned from war centuries ago because they were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too willing to keep fighting even when everything else had fallen. Humans, the Deathworlders from Earth, a planet so deadly that every species called it by one name, the world that should not exist. But on that desperate day, when the Arathi soldiers stood trembling behind burning barricades, their armor cracked and their rifles overheating, the skies above them suddenly shifted. A ripple tore across the upper atmosphere like a giant hand ripping through cloth, and the space just beyond the planet's orbit darkened as a massive silhouette emerged from hyperspace, blocking out the stars behind it. For a moment, the entire world of Arathi 7 froze. The soldiers, the civilians, even the Dravix paused as a deep rumbling sound shivered through the air. The Arathi command station frantically scanned the object, their screens glitching from the sheer size of the ship. Then, without warning, a single message flashed across every Arathi monitor, every comm screen, every speaker, from the smallest helmet radio to the largest planetary beacon: hold your ground. Terran drop force inbound. The words felt like a shockwave ripping through the atmosphere. The Arathi commanders stared at each other in disbelief. Terrans? Here? Impossible. Humans hadn't been seen in any military conflict for generations. The Council had sworn Earth was off limits. But before they could think, dark shapes shot out from the massive vessel, small at first, but growing larger as they tore through the sky. The capsules blazed like black meteors, fire trailing behind them as they screamed downward at impossible speed. The Dravix roared at the sight, raising their claws toward the falling objects, but even they seemed uncertain, as if on some primal level, they sensed something was wrong, something was coming they were not prepared to face. The Arathi soldiers stood frozen, their hearts hammering so loudly they could barely hear anything else. What kind of reinforcements fell from the sky with such force? What kind of warriors arrived like comets? The capsules crashed into the battlefield with earth-shattering impact. 1, 2, 10, 20. Each strike sending shockwaves that blasted dust and flame outward. As the smoke rose, thick and black, the battlefield fell silent for the first time in weeks. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The Arathi soldiers stared into the dust clouds, waiting for something to move, but nothing happened. Not a sound, not a breath, not a single figure. The capsules stood like dark metal tombs, their glowing seams hissing softly. The Dravix growled nervously, stepping back instead of forward, unsure if these objects were weapons or creatures. The Arathi commander whispered, Who did they send? Some believed it was automated drones. Some thought it was a council weapon. Some feared it was a trap. But then, a metallic hiss echoed across the battlefield. One capsule door slid open. Slowly, deliberately, as if the being inside did not fear anything watching. A tall figure stepped out, covered head to toe in black armor. The armor wasn't shiny or decorative. It was practical, brutal, built for survival. The visor on the helmet glowed with a faint blue light, cutting through the smoke like a predator's eyes scanning the world for threats. The figure stepped forward, its boots crunching broken stone underfoot. Behind it, more capsules opened with loud, heavy clicks. One by one, humans stepped out. Not fast, not panicked, not rushed. Calm, controlled, focused. The Arathi soldiers felt their throats tighten. These weren't soldiers. These were hunters. Humans walked with the same stillness as creatures who grew up on a Deathworld. A world filled with storms, earthquakes, predators with venomous teeth, forests that tried to kill you, oceans that swallowed ships whole. Their bodies moved like steel forged under pressure. Their eyes, glowing behind their helmets, were sharp, calculating, unforgiving. The Dravix roared and charged forward, believing numbers were enough to crush anything. But the humans didn't flinch. They didn't shout. They didn't call orders. They simply shifted their stances, their hands lowering to their weapons with the slow grace of apex predators preparing to strike. The first Dravix leaped toward a human soldier, claws outstretched, jaws open, but the human didn't step back. He stepped forward. With terrifying speed, he twisted under the monster's arm and drove a blade into the Dravix's side. The movement so smooth it looked like water flowing. The creature collapsed instantly, its roar dying in its throat. The battlefield went silent again. Then the Terran commander stepped forward. His armor was heavier, darker, carrying scars from countless battles. His voice came through the comms, deep and calm, not shouting but speaking like someone who had killed monsters bigger than this. Arathi 7, he said, your backup has arrived. At that moment, every Dravix on the battlefield screamed in fury. Every human soldier raised their weapons. Every Arathi soldier felt a surge of hope and fear at the same time. And as the two armies faced each other across the burning field, Lyra, the young Arathi scout, realized the truth that sent a cold shiver through her bones. Humans were not coming to save the Arathi. Humans were coming to hunt. The Terran drop force moved with silent, deadly precision, their presence alone shifting the entire energy of the battlefield. This was the moment everything changed. This was the moment the galaxy remembered why humans were banned from war. This was the moment Earth's Deathworlders arrived. The moment the Terran drop force stepped out of their smoking capsules, the entire battlefield shifted as if the world itself understood that a new kind of war had begun. And the Arathi soldiers, exhausted and trembling, watched in stunned silence as the humans formed a tight formation with movements so smooth and synchronized it felt like they were pieces of a single living organism built for destruction. The Dravix, enraged by the arrival of unexpected enemies, unleashed deafening roars that shook the burning sky, their massive bodies thundering across the cracked ground, claws tearing through debris as they charged with the confidence of predators who had never known fear. But this time, something in the air felt wrong to them, something instinctive and ancient telling them that the beings standing before them were not prey, not rivals, but something far more dangerous, creatures molded by a world harsher than any battlefield the Dravix had ever known. Lyra, the Arathi scout who had watched her home crumble piece by piece, felt her breath catch as she stared into the glowing blue visors of the humans. She had heard the stories, whispers of Earth, the Deathworld where jungles hunted you, oceans swallowed armies, storms ripped continents open, and yet humans survived, adapted, and grew stronger. But she never believed them until she saw the humans walk through smoke without flinching, their posture steady, their breathing controlled, their presence radiating a kind of calm that felt more terrifying than the Dravix's rage. The Dravix launched the first attack. A massive beast twice the height of a human leaped forward, its claws glowing with acidic venom as it aimed to tear the nearest human in half. But the Deathworlder didn't move back. Instead, he stepped slightly to the side with such minimal motion that it almost looked like an illusion, and the Dravix's claws sliced through empty air. Before the beast could recover, The human twisted with deadly precision and slammed his elbow into the creature's throat. A single brutal strike that made the massive monster collapse, gasping onto the ground. The Arathi soldiers gasped in disbelief. How could something so small defeat something so huge with one strike? But the humans didn't pause to enjoy the moment. They moved instantly, almost silently, shifting positions like a pack of predators circling wounded prey. The Terran commander raised his hand in a simple gesture, and without a word, the Deathwelders launched themselves into the charging Dravix. The battlefield exploded into motion as humans met monsters in a clash so violent it sent echoes across the valley. The Dravix swung their massive claws, but humans ducked, dodged, and countered with movements too fast for the alien eye to process. Their strikes weren't wild or chaotic. They were precise, controlled, and devastating. Every time a Dravix struck, two humans struck back. Every time a monster roared, a human soldier answered with a silent blade. Lyra felt chills racing down her spine as she realized the truth. Humans weren't fearless because they lacked fear. They were fearless because they had learned to fight with fear, to use it, to control it, to master it. They were creatures of instinct sharpened by suffering. And as she watched them move, she understood something even more terrifying. This wasn't humans at their strongest. This was humans holding back. A massive Dravix warrior slammed its claw into the ground, cracking the earth and sending humans flying backward. The Arathi soldiers screamed as the dust cleared, expecting to see human bodies broken. But when the smoke parted, the Deathwelders stood back up, blood dripping from their armor but eyes burning brighter, as if pain only made them stronger. Their commander, towering and calm, simply said, "Again." And the humans charged forward with renewed fury. The Dravix overpack, sensing something was deeply wrong, attempted to flank the humans, sending three monstrous creatures around to attack from behind. But the humans anticipated it. Without turning their heads, without looking back, three Terran snipers fired in perfect unison, their bullets slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. The Dravix dropped instantly, their roars dying before they touched the ground. Lyra stared in awe. How did they sense enemies behind them without seeing? Then she remembered the stories. Humans from Earth evolved with predators stalking them constantly. They learned to hear danger in the wind, to smell danger in the air, to feel danger in their bones. Every Deathworld instinct was alive on this battlefield. But the part that shook Lyra the most wasn't how humans fought. It was how they reacted to the Arathi soldiers. When a young Arathi warrior stumbled, bleeding from a Dravix strike, a human instantly pulled him behind cover, shielding him with his own body without hesitation. When an Arathi medic panicked and dropped her equipment, a human soldier knelt beside her, stabilizing her hands and whispering, "Breathe. You're safe." For a species known for brutality, their kindness was overwhelming. Humans weren't cold killers. They were protectors. They were fighters because they had to be. Their violence was born from survival, but their compassion was born from choice. And that combination, violent instinct mixed with unbreakable heart, was what made them Deathwelders. The Dravix roared louder, regrouping for another massive push. The ground shook under their charge. The sky filled with dust. The Arathi soldiers braced themselves for death. But the Terran commander stepped forward, planting his boots firmly into the ground, and lifted his helmet slightly to speak directly into the howling battlefield. "Arathi 7, he said, his voice deep, cold, and steady, "we stand with you." The simple sentence hit Lyra with more force than any explosion. It wasn't just a military statement. It was a promise. A Deathwelder promise. And the whole battlefield felt it. Humans surged forward like a tidal wave of fury. They were outnumbered, outmatched in size, and surrounded by monsters. But they fought like creatures who had crawled out of fire their whole lives. They fought like beings shaped by storms, sharpened by danger, hardened by a world that tried to kill them every single day. And as they tore through the Dravix front lines, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Pure, burning hope. Because she realized that humans weren't here to survive the battle. Humans were here to win it. The battlefield of Arathi 7 had never seen anything like the Terran drop force, and as the smoke cleared from the first terrifying clash between humans and Dravix, A strange quiet settled over the ruined valley, a quiet filled not with peace but with a trembling tension, like the whole world was holding its breath to see what happened next. The Arathi soldiers watched in disbelief as the humans regrouped with frightening precision, their armor dented and scratched, their faces streaked with dirt and blood beneath their visors, yet their stance unbroken, their eyes glowing with that same sharp blue fire that made even the bravest Arathi warriors feel small. Lyra, still crouched behind a cracked shield wall, felt her heart pounding so fast she could barely keep up with her own breathing. She had seen warriors from every corner of the galaxy, elite soldiers with armor worth more than starships, assassins who moved through shadows like ghosts, and generals who commanded armies with a single gesture. But never in her life had she seen fighters like these humans who moved through chaos like they were born inside it, who treated fear like an old friend, who turned their own pain into fuel for their rage. And as she stared, she felt an emotion rise inside her that she hadn't felt since the war began. Admiration, raw and overwhelming, for a species she once feared. But there was no time to process it, because the Draviks regrouped faster than expected. Their roars shook the broken mountains, and new waves of monstrous warriors stepped out from behind the smoke. These were not the smaller Draviks foot soldiers. These were the shock brutes, twice as large and 3 times as armored, with massive bone-plated shoulders and skull-like faces that snarled with hatred. The ground cracked under their weight as they gathered in a tight formation, preparing for a charge that would flatten anything in their path. The Arathi soldiers panicked, shouting warnings and scrambling to take defensive positions. But the humans did not panic. They stood silently, watching, analyzing, waiting. The Terran commander stepped forward, raising one hand, signaling his soldiers to hold. His posture radiated a silent power, as if he understood the Draviks better than they understood themselves. Lyra saw something shift in his eyes, not fear, not anger, but a calm sadness, like someone remembering old wounds that never healed. And that expression alone made the hairs on her body stand on end. The Draviks brutes charged as one, their roars echoing across the valley, kicking up storms of dust and cracked stone in their wake. The earth trembled violently beneath their monstrous feet. The Arathi defenders braced for impact, convinced that nothing, not even humans, could stop that many brutes charging at once. But the Terran commander simply whispered on comms, "Hold, hold." The humans did not move an inch. At the very last second, when the Draviks were only heartbeats away, the humans exploded into motion with such perfect timing that the battlefield looked like it had been sliced open by invisible blades. They split into 2 units, moving in opposite directions like shadows dancing in a storm. The Draviks brutes crashed into empty space, stumbling in confusion. And then the humans attacked, not from the front, but from the sides, from angles the Arathi couldn't even see until the humans were already cutting through Dravik's armor. Their blades glowed with blue energy as they slashed deep into the joints and weak points of the massive beasts. The brutes roared in fury, swinging their heavy claws wildly, but the humans slipped under them like water flowing around stone, fast, fluid, unpredictable. Lyra gasped as she watched a small human soldier leap onto the back of a brute twice his height, using nothing but handholds in the armor to climb up before driving a blade into the base of the creature's skull. The brute collapsed instantly, crashing into the ground with a trembling thud. Another human soldier, covered in blood but still fighting with relentless focus, slid across the ground to dodge a crushing strike before firing a burst of plasma into a brute's chest at point-blank range. The blast knocked the creature backward, its armor cracking like shattered ice. The Arathi soldiers watched with a mix of fear and awe. They had never seen an army fight like this, never seen warriors who fought not with strategy alone, but with instinct, with emotion, with something primal and terrifyingly alive burning inside them. The Terran commander fought at the center of it all, moving with a graceful brutality that felt almost unreal. He parried a brute's massive claw with a single forearm, sparks flying, then ducked low and delivered a bone-shattering punch to the monster's stomach. The brute folded instantly, a creature 3 times his size collapsing like a doll made of straw. The commander stood tall, breathing heavily, his visor cracked and glowing. Lyra felt fear and admiration twist together in her chest. "They fight like something born from the fire of their own world," she whispered. But then something happened that changed everything. A young Arathi soldier, wounded and barely standing, suddenly found himself cornered by a wounded brute who refused to die. The monster lunged at him with a furious roar, its claws outstretched. The Arathi froze, unable to lift his rifle in time. But before the brute could reach him, a human soldier threw himself in front of the attack. The claws tore deep into his armor, slashing through layers of plating and flesh, and the human fell hard onto the ground. The brute lifted its arm to strike again, but the wounded human grabbed its wrist with both hands, eyes burning through his cracked visor. Blood poured down his armor, but he tightened his grip, muscles shaking violently. "Run," he whispered to the Arathi. "Go!" The Arathi soldier stumbled backward, tears filling his eyes, watching a human he had never met sacrificing himself for someone who wasn't even from his world. But the human didn't stop at sacrifice. With a roar that sounded more like an animal than a man, he twisted the brute's arm with impossible strength, snapping bones with a sickening crack. The brute howled in agony, and the human soldier slammed his blade into its throat, killing it instantly before collapsing to one knee. The Arathi soldier ran back to him, hands trembling, whispering, "Why would you save me? Why?" The human smiled weakly behind the visor, blood dripping from his jaw. "Because you're alive," he said. "And alive is worth protecting." Lyra covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. It was the first time she understood who humans really were, not monsters, not mindless killers, but protectors shaped by a cruel world, fighters who stood between death and the weak, warriors who carried pain like armor and hope like a shield. The battlefield fell into a trembling silence after the Dravic's shock brutes collapsed, and for a moment the burning world of Arathi 7 felt as if it was holding its breath, trying to understand what kind of creatures the humans truly were, because the Terran drop force did not celebrate, did not cheer, did not even slow down. Instead, they stood in the middle of the destroyed valley with their heads lowered, breathing hard, covered in blood and dust, but their eyes still burning with the same ruthless determination that made even the bravest Arathi soldiers take a step back in awe. Lyra watched the humans with wide, shaking eyes as they lifted their fallen comrade, the soldier who had sacrificed himself to save the young Arathi, placing him gently on the ground with a care so soft it broke her heart, because these humans who fought like monsters also carried a strange, heartbreaking gentleness that no alien species had ever understood. The Terran commander knelt beside the injured soldier, placing one heavy gauntlet on the man's chest. The soldier coughed, blood staining his cracked visor, but he forced a faint smile as he whispered something only the commander could hear. The commander's expression tightened, anger, pain, pride, mixing together in a storm behind his glowing visor, and Lyra realized that humans did not fight for glory, or victory, or medals. They fought for each other, for the lives beside them, for the simple unbreakable rule written deep inside every Terran heart. No one gets left behind. The Arathi soldiers felt shame burn inside them, shame that they had ever believed humans were dangerous simply because they came from a Deathworld, shame that they had feared a species whose greatest strength was not their violence but their loyalty. But the moment of silence shattered when the ground beneath them vibrated violently, a deep rumble shaking dust loose from the broken cliffs. The Dravics weren't defeated, not even close. Their roars echoed across the valley as fresh waves of monsters appeared over the ridge, hundreds of them, their glowing armor and massive bodies charging like a tsunami of nightmares. The Arathi gasped in horror. This wave was bigger than anything before. There were too many. Far too many. The humans tightened their formation immediately, their broken bodies shifting into position with terrifying discipline, each soldier stepping forward like a wall built from pain and rage. The Terran commander rose, towering over his squad, his armor cracked, his visor flickering, but his presence radiating something so strong, so absolute, that even the ground seemed to steady beneath him. Lyra watched him in awe as he stepped in front of his entire force, raising his rifle with slow, deliberate motion, his voice echoing through the comms with a calmness that cut through fear like a knife through cloth. "Terrans," he said, "brace." The humans responded instantly, as if the single word awakened something ancient inside them, something primal, something powerful, something that made the Arathi realize that humans were not done yet. The Dravics roared louder, their massive bodies shaking the cracked earth as they charged with unstoppable force. The Arathi panicked, shouting warnings, preparing to retreat, because to them this new wave looked like death itself racing toward them. But the humans didn't move backwards. They moved forward. Every Arathi soldier froze in disbelief as the Terran drop force, injured, outnumbered, exhausted, charged straight into the Dravix wave with a fury so intense it turned the entire battlefield into a storm of fire and steel. The clash was deafening. A Dravix brute swung its claws with enough force to tear through a tank, but a human caught the strike with both hands, muscles straining, bones cracking, yet he held on with a roar that shook the monster before driving a blade into its throat. Another human threw himself into the path of two Dravix warriors, taking a blow to the chest that sent him sliding across the ground. But he got back up, coughing blood and smiling with eyes that burned with unbroken will. Lyra felt her soul shake at the sight. How could they keep going? How could they still fight when any other species would have fallen long ago? The truth struck her like lightning. Humans did not fight because they were strong. They fought because they refused to let weakness decide anything. They fought because they had learned from their deadly planet that giving up was the same as dying. And as the Dravix wave collided with the Terran drop force, Lyra realized the most terrifying truth of all. Humans were built for impossible battles. One by one, human soldiers grabbed wounded Arathi and pulled them behind the Terran line, protecting them with their own bodies, shouting for medics, refusing to let even strangers fall. A young Arathi boy, no older than 15, was trapped under debris as a Dravix warrior closed in on him, its claws ready to slice him apart. Before anyone could react, a human sprinted through the battlefield, sliding under the monster's arm and pulling the boy free before stabbing the creature straight through the eye. The boy sobbed, clinging to the human's arm, whispering, "Why? Why save me?" The human, covered in blood and scars, simply replied, "Because that's what we do." Lyra's chest tightened painfully. She had heard stories of humans. She had heard the warnings. She had heard the fears. But she had not heard the truth, that humans were terrifying not because they were monsters, but because they refused to let anyone die alone. And that truth changed everything she believed. The battle raged louder. The earth cracked open under the weight of war. Humans fell. Dravix fell. But every time a human soldier was struck down, two more rose in his place, fighting with the fury of a world forged in chaos. The Terran commander fought like a legend, his towering body clashing with Dravix warriors as his armor shattered piece by piece. He caught a massive Dravix fist with one hand, stopping it mid-air, and then crushed the creature's throat with the other. Blood sprayed across the battlefield, and the commander roared with a grief-filled fury that made even the Dravix hesitate. Every human on the field seemed empowered by his presence, pushing harder, fighting faster, refusing to fall. Finally, the second wave of Dravix broke, collapsing under the unstoppable force of humans who refused to die, humans who carried their world's unforgiving legacy into battle like a burning banner. The remaining Dravix fled into the mountains, their monstrous roars echoing through the smoke-filled sky. The battlefield grew silent once more, broken only by the crackling flames and the ragged breathing of survivors. The Terran commander looked across the ruins, scanning for injured, checking his squad, his chest rising and falling with slow heaviness, his armor dripping with blood that wasn't all his own. Lyra stared at him, tears blurring her vision, her heart trembling with a mix of fear, respect, and something deeper, a belief. A belief she had not felt since the war began. The victory over the second wave gave the Arathi only a moment to breathe before the sky itself began to twist in unnatural shapes, as if the atmosphere was being pulled and stretched by invisible claws, and every soldier, Arathi and human alike, lifted their eyes in horror as the clouds turned pitch black and electricity crackled across the burning horizon. There was something coming, something colossal, something that made even the Dravix warriors roar in a different tone, fear instead of rage. The ground trembled beneath their feet, stronger than before, not like footsteps, but like the heartbeat of something buried deep under the planet's crust. Lyra clutched her rifle with shaking hands, her breath frozen in her throat as she looked toward the northern ridge where a massive shadow slowly emerged from the thick smoke. It was far larger than any Dravix brute they had fought so far. Its outline alone rose higher than the ruined towers of the Arathi capital, with horns like jagged black mountains and a glowing molten chest that pulsed like a furnace ready to burst. The Arathi whispered its name in terror, the Dravix overlord. A creature said to have ended entire civilizations. A walking catastrophe. A monster too strong for any army. The Arathi commander stepped back, panic written across his face. We cannot stop that, he whispered. But even before he finished speaking, the humans moved. The Terran commander stepped forward, his armor cracked, one arm bleeding, visor flickering, but his presence burning brighter than any flame on the battlefield. He stared at the Overlord with a calmness that Lyra couldn't understand. How could anyone look at a world-ending beast without trembling? But then she realized, humans didn't fear monsters. Humans grew up fighting monsters every day on their own planet. The Overlord roared, a deafening sound that shook the mountains apart, blasting shockwaves that sent Arathi soldiers crashing to the ground. Humans stumbled but didn't fall. They dug their boots into the dirt, standing tall against the force. The Terran commander's voice echoed through the comms, cold and sharp, "Terrans, advance." And the humans charged, straight toward a creature that could have swallowed them whole. The Overlord raised one arm and brought it down like a collapsing building. The ground exploded under the strike, sending fire and stone in every direction. Lyra screamed as she saw 3 human soldiers thrown like ragdolls across the battlefield, their bodies skidding across the ground. But when the dust cleared, those same soldiers got back up, limping, bleeding, but alive, eyes burning with a fire that made the Overlord pause for a heartbeat. The humans spread out with impossible speed, moving like a storm of black armor tearing across the earth, firing into the Overlord's hide, their bullets glowing blue as they struck the monster's skin, but the bullets bounced off harmlessly. The Arathi watched in despair. "It's useless," one soldier cried. "Nothing pierces an Overlord." But the humans didn't stop. They changed formation instantly, shifting from ranged attack to assault, climbing onto its legs like insects crawling up a titan. The Overlord roared again, shaking its massive limbs, trying to throw them off, but the humans held on, embedding magnetic spikes into its armor, pulling themselves upward inch by inch. The Arathi couldn't believe what they were seeing. Tiny humans, each no bigger than the Overlord's claw, climbing toward its chest like warriors trying to break into a living volcano. One human soldier was crushed instantly by a swing of the Overlord's tail, but even as his broken body fell, another Deathworlder took his place without a second of hesitation. "They never stop," Lyra whispered, tears blurring her vision. "They fight, even when death is certain." The Terran commander moved like a shadow among giants, sprinting across the battlefield, dodging massive blows with a speed that seemed impossible for someone his size. He leaped onto the Overlord's leg, using fallen debris as stepping stones, climbing with terrifying grace until he reached the monster's torso. The Overlord roared again, turning its molten chest toward the humans, and for a moment, it seemed like the world had plunged into hellfire as flames burst outward in a blazing eruption. The humans screamed in pain but didn't fall. Their armor sizzled, their skin burned beneath the metal, yet they kept climbing. Lyra felt her heart break as she watched them embrace pain like an old enemy, refusing to give up. The Terran commander reached the glowing cracks in the Overlord's armor, where the molten energy pulsed the strongest, and he shouted a single word into his comm, "Now." The humans below hurled explosive charges upward, their timing so perfect it felt like telepathy. The commander caught the first charge midair, slammed it into the Overlord's chest cavity, and pushed off, falling backward as the Overlord tried to grab him. But the other humans caught him mid-fall, locking their arms around his before gravity could take him. A single human, barely 19, held the commander's arm with every ounce of strength he had left, teeth gritted, tears streaming from his eyes as he screamed, "I won't let go, sir." The commander stared at the young soldier, eyes softening for the briefest moment. Then he whispered, "Good man." The charge detonated. A thunderous explosion ripped through the Overlord's chest, tearing molten armor apart, sending flames shooting into the sky like a dying star collapsing. The Overlord staggered backward, screaming with a sound that tore the air apart. The humans who were still climbing were thrown off, their bodies crashing to the ground. But even in agony they crawled forward, refusing to let the monster recover. The Arathi soldiers watched in pure disbelief. They're insane," one whispered. "No," Lyra replied, her voice trembling with awe. "They are human." The Overlord, wounded and enraged, slammed one limb into the ground, sending shockwaves so violent that the terrain split open. Humans tumbled into cracks, but other humans reached in after them, pulling them back up in the middle of war, refusing to let even one fall to the planet's death. The Terran commander rose again, clutching his side, blood seeping through broken armor, but his eyes blazing with a fury so powerful even the Overlord hesitated. He lifted his rifle, aimed it at the exposed molten heart of the Overlord, and emptied the entire magazine directly into it. The shots pierced the exposed core like a hammer striking glass. The Overlord froze, just for a breath, before collapsing with a roar that echoed across mountains, its massive body crashing into the valley like a dying god. The fall of the Dravix Overlord should have ended the battle, but instead it awakened something far darker, because as the giant creature's molten heart cracked and its body collapsed into the burning valley, a strange vibration rippled across the entire planet, like a warning, like a signal, like the final cry of a dying monster calling to something even worse. The Arathi soldiers, exhausted and half in shock, looked around in confusion as their scanners began to glitch violently, lights flickering red, alarms screaming with messages they had never seen before. Lyra wiped dust from her visor, staring at the trembling ground beneath her boots, her throat tightening as she whispered, "It's not over. Something else is coming." The humans felt it first. Their instincts sharpened by a lifetime of surviving Deathworld storms and predators made their muscles tighten. Their hearts freeze for a second, their hands automatically reaching for weapons even before their minds understood what was happening. The Terran commander lifted his head toward the dark clouds above as the sky twisted violently, lightning streaking across the blackened atmosphere like veins of raw energy. His voice, low and steady, cut through the chaos. "Terrans, defensive positions. Now!" The humans moved instantly, ignoring their wounds, forming a tight wall around the injured Arathi and their own fallen. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew it was big. Suddenly, the Overlord's corpse began to glow from within, a deep burning orange that pulsed like a dying heartbeat trying to force itself back to life. Cracks spread across its armor, molten veins breaking open, spilling liquid fire onto the ground. The Arathi screamed in terror. "It's regenerating," one shouted, but the Terran commander shook his head, eyes narrowing. "No, something else is inside." And he was right. The Overlord's chest split apart with a deafening crack, and from within its ruined body crawled a smaller creature. Thin, tall, its bones glowing, its eyes burning with pure white fire. It screamed, not in pain but in rage and hunger, a sound so sharp that even the human soldiers stumbled as blood dripped from their ears. Lyra fell to her knees, clutching her head as the sound pierced through her skull like a blade of ice. The creature was the true threat, the hidden horror inside every Dravix lord. The overmined larva, a parasitic being capable of controlling entire armies once it matured. If it escaped, Arathi 7 would fall in hours. The larva moved with terrifying speed, a blur of white heat as it darted across the battlefield, striking down both Dravix and Arathi instantly. But when it came near the humans, it hesitated, not because it feared them, but because it sensed something inside them that it had never encountered before. A kind of willpower so intense that it felt like a wall of fire blocking its instincts. The Terran commander met its burning gaze without flinching, stepping forward despite the injuries weighing on his body. "You picked the wrong planet," he growled. The larva screeched and lunged toward him with claws so sharp they sliced the air into ribbons. But before it reached him, a human soldier, barely conscious, limping, armor broken, threw himself into its path, tackling the creature with every last drop of strength he had left. The impact blasted both of them across the ground, fire exploding around them as the lava ripped into the soldier's armor. The human screamed, not in fear but in fury, digging his fingers into the lava's glowing bones, holding it down even as it tore into him. "Get out!" he growled through clenched teeth. "Get out of my galaxy!" Lyra's vision blurred with tears. She watched the human fight a creature made of pure energy with nothing but raw determination and his bare hands. The Terran commander sprinted toward them, but the lava was too fast. It slipped free, leaving the human soldier bleeding on the ground. The commander slid beside the fallen soldier, grabbing his armor and whispering something only humans could understand. The soldier looked up at him with fading eyes, blood running from his mouth, and whispered, "Finish it, sir." The commander pressed his forehead against the soldier's for a brief second, a gesture filled with more pain and love than any alien species could understand, then stood with a roar so full of grief that even the mountains seemed to tremble. The lava screeched again, gathering energy, preparing to unleash a blast that could kill every living being in the valley. The Arathi scrambled to find cover, but there was nowhere to run. Lyra collapsed beside a broken wall, whispering, "This is the end. This is how we die." But the humans were not done. Not even close. The Terran commander raised his rifle, its barrel glowing white-hot from earlier attacks, and charged straight at the lava even though he knew he would probably die. The remaining human soldiers followed, dragging themselves through pain, limping, some crawling, but none stopping, none surrendering. They had lost too much. They had buried too many. They had seen their own world become a death world and survive. They would not let this creature take another world. The lava unleashed a blast of white energy at them, a blast so powerful it shattered stone and melted metal. But the humans kept going, pushing through the burning shockwave, their armor glowing red, their skin blistering, their voices shouting in pure defiance. Lyra watched in terror and awe as they fought through a storm that should have killed them instantly. She finally understood the truth every alien feared but never admitted. Humans didn't survive because they were strong. Humans survived because they refused to die. The Terran commander reached the lava in one final burst of speed, throwing himself onto the creature and driving his blade deep into its core. The lava screamed, its body exploding with light, but the commander didn't let go. He held it down, forcing the blade deeper even as his armor broke apart under the heat. The other humans joined him, striking again and again with burning hands and broken weapons. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the lava split apart in a blinding flash, its energy imploding into itself with a scream that faded into nothing. The overmined lava's destruction brought a moment of brutal silence to the battlefield, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of something ancient breathing in the dark, something watching from deep beneath the fractured crust of Arathi 7, and every soldier, Arathi and Terran alike, felt it like a cold hand pressed against their hearts. The ground vibrated again, slow at first, then building into a deep, rumbling pulse that matched the rhythm of something awakening far below. Lyra stumbled back, clutching her helmet, whispering, "No, no more, please no more." But the world did not listen. From the cracked earth where the Overlord had fallen, a new light began to glow, this time purple, flickering violently like lightning inside stone. The Terran commander turned slowly, his body trembling, his armor broken, blood running down his arm. But his eyes, those fierce, unbreakable human eyes, stared into the glowing fissure with a mixture of exhaustion and steady, deadly calm. "Terrans," he said in a low voice that carried across the battlefield, "brace yourselves, this isn't done." The humans tightened formation immediately even though they could barely stand. Their chests heaved with heavy breaths, their hands shook from pain, and several soldiers were holding their wounds with bloody fingers. But still they moved forward, placing themselves between the Arathi and the glowing crack in the earth. The light grew brighter, pulsing faster, until the ground exploded upward in a burst of violet fire, sending rocks and molten debris flying into the air. The shockwave knocked Arathi soldiers to the ground and even forced several humans back a step. From the smoke rose a monstrous shape that made every other Dravix creature look small, towering, skeletal, wrapped in corrupted armor, its body carved with glowing runes of ancient Dravix prophecy. Its face was skull-like, its eyes glowing pools of white fire, and from its back sprouted long, blade-like claws pulsing with energy. Lyra's breath died in her throat. "A Dravix archfiend," she whispered shakily, barely able to stand. "It can control the minds of whole armies, it can destroy a planet." The archfiend turned its head slowly toward the battlefield, its fiery gaze sweeping across the injured Arathi, the broken terrain, the fallen bodies, before settling on the humans with a hatred so deep it felt like the air itself caught fire. The archfiend raised one claw to the sky, and the clouds responded instantly, swirling into a violent storm, lightning tearing the sky open as if the heavens themselves were screaming. The Arathi commander cried out, Retreat. Everyone retreat. But the humans didn't move. They didn't run. They didn't hesitate. Instead, the Terran commander stepped forward, every limp, every bruise, every wound visible. But his presence radiated a terrifying power, a cold determination forged from pain and purpose. The Archfiend slammed its claws down, firing bolts of violet lightning that ripped across the battlefield, melting stone, burning trees, disintegrating Dravix corpses. Arathi soldiers screamed and fell back, shielding their faces from the explosion of fire. But the humans walked through it, steps slow, heavy, but unbroken. Their armor sparked and melted, their skin blistered beneath the heat, yet their eyes burned brighter than the fire around them. Lyra watched in stunned horror and awe. How are they still moving? She whispered. And then she understood. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting because their fallen brothers were lying behind them. They were fighting because the Arathi were behind them. They were fighting because Deathworlders do not back down when something threatens the weak. The Archfiend released a roar that tore the sky apart, a roar filled with raw psychic energy that stabbed into every mind on the battlefield. The Arathi collapsed instantly, screaming in agony, clutching their heads as the Archfiend's voice poured into them like poison. Even human soldiers staggered, the psychic wave crashing into their skulls like a hammer made of fire and darkness. Several humans fell to one knee, blood dripping from their noses, their hands shaking violently. But they didn't break. They bared their teeth. They roared back. Their voices, raw, furious, filled with human pain, echoed across the battlefield like the cry of a species that did not know surrender. The Archfiend's glow flickered in surprise. It hadn't expected resistance. It hadn't expected creatures who could stand against its psychic assault. It didn't understand humans. The Terran commander forced himself upright, planting his blood-covered boot in the cracked ground, lifting his cracked rifle in one hand. His voice, shaking, hurting, but unbroken, cut through the psychic storm like a blade. Terrans, with me. The humans rose together, limping, bleeding, some barely conscious, but they rose. Because that is what humans do. The Archfiend screeched in fury, launching all 6 of its long energy blades at the commander, each one humming with enough power to slice through a tank. But the humans moved, throwing themselves into the path of the blades, taking the hits meant for their leader. One soldier was cut through the chest. Another lost an arm. A third was thrown 50 meters back, crashing into stone. But the commander kept moving forward because his people refused to let him fall. Lyra sobbed as she watched, her heart twisting painfully. Humans were dying, not for themselves, not for glory, not for revenge, but for each other, for strangers, for a planet that wasn't theirs. She whispered through her tears, "Why? Why do humans fight like this?" And then the answer hit her like a thunderbolt. Because somewhere deep in human hearts is a truth the galaxy had forgotten. Humans fight hardest not when they want to kill, but when they want to protect. The Archfiend gathered energy for its final attack, a swirling mass of violet fire that could vaporize everything within miles. The humans saw it. They knew they wouldn't survive. But they didn't stop. They locked shields. They leaned on each other. They took their positions in front of the Arathi, like a wall of broken steel refusing to fall. The Terran commander, breathing like a dying man, lifted his last grenade, its energy core flickering and unstable. He looked over his shoulder at the Arathi, at the child soldier he'd saved earlier, at Lyra who stared at him with tears falling. His voice was barely audible as he whispered, "Tell them what humans did here." Then he charged. The death of the Archfiend should have meant victory, but instead the battlefield fell into a strange, unnatural stillness, as if the very air was waiting for something, watching, thinking, and every living being on Arathi 7, human, Arathi, even dying Dravix, felt an invisible weight pressing against their chests, a suffocating reminder that survival never comes without a price. Smoke drifted across the valley like ghostly fingers, moving around broken armor and shattered weapons, and in the center of it all stood the Terran commander, barely holding himself upright. His armor fused into his skin, blood pouring down his arms in slow, steady streams that looked almost peaceful against the roaring fires around him. The surviving humans formed a loose circle around him, limping, staggering, some coughing blood, others clutching wounds that would kill any other species instantly. Yet their eyes still burned, not with rage now, but with something heavier, something older, sorrow. Lyra stepped forward on trembling legs, her heart breaking at the sight of them. These warriors had saved her people, saved her world, saved lives they didn't even know, and yet they stood in silence, shoulders bowed, as if waiting for judgment from the sky itself. "It's over," she whispered to herself, "it has to be over." But the Terran commander slowly shook his head, eyes focused on the sky, his voice barely a whisper, cracked and pained. "No, not yet." Before she could ask what he meant, the ground pulsed again. This time not with Dravix energy, not with lava corruption, but with something far heavier, something that carried the weight of thousands of dead worlds. The sky turned dark. Not the darkness of clouds or smoke, but the darkness that comes when something massive blocks the sun. Lyra looked up, and her breath stopped. A shadow spread across the sky, stretching from horizon to horizon, a gigantic structure descending through the atmosphere so slowly it looked like a falling moon. The Arathi soldiers dropped their weapons in shock. Even the humans looked upward with grim acceptance instead of fear. A massive, colossal Dravix structure, bigger than any ship she had ever seen, was entering the planet's orbit, its surface shaped like enormous bones fused into metal, its core glowing with ancient purple fire. It wasn't a ship. It was a hive, a living fortress, a Dravix world eater, something the galaxy believed had been destroyed centuries ago. Lyra's voice broke into a terrified whisper. That thing can swallow an entire planet." Before panic could erupt, the Terran commander lifted one shaking arm and pointed toward the burning horizon. Lyra followed his gesture, and her heart felt like it stopped beating. Far beyond the smoke, beyond the burning ruins, beyond the falling ash, the sky rippled, bending like liquid. A deep blue tear opened in space, glowing brighter and brighter until it widened like an eye. Then, shapes emerged, massive dark silhouettes, hundreds of them, moving in complete silence. No roar, no sound, just the soft hum of engines built for war. It was a human fleet. But not any fleet. These were the legendary ships whispered about in galactic nightmares, Terran dreadnoughts. Deathworld built war machines, each the size of small continents, each carrying the firepower of entire alien empires. Their hulls were scarred, their designs ancient and brutal, built for survival instead of beauty. Their engines glowed with a cold blue light that made the stars themselves seem dim. Lyra felt her knees weaken, tears rising to her eyes as she whispered, "Humanity sent reinforcements." But the Terran commander didn't smile. He didn't cheer. Instead his expression grew darker, heavier, as if the sight hurt him more than it relieved him. "They are not here to help," he whispered. "They are here because they sensed what woke up." The Arathi stared in confusion, but the humans understood immediately. A silence rippled through their ranks, heavy, almost mourning. Lyra swallowed hard. "What woke up?" she asked. The commander's voice was quiet, broken, filled with pain. "The Dravix didn't come here for your world. They came here because something under this planet, something ancient, something older than humans, something older than the Dravix, is waking up." Before she could understand his words, the ground split open again, not in cracks, not in small bursts, but in a massive fracture that tore across the entire valley like the planet itself was screaming. Light erupted from the fissures, golden, ancient, powerful, and for a moment the world looked like it was glowing from inside. A deep voice, not spoken, not heard, but felt, rumbled through their bones, a voice so old it made time feel small. The human fleet reacted instantly. Every dreadnought shifted position. Cannons rotated. Engines thundered. But the Terran commander raised his hand weakly, shouting through blood-choked breath, "Don't fire. You'll wake it faster." Lyra felt her heart collapse under fear. Whatever lay under Arathi 7 was not Dravix. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything the galaxy had studied. It was something forgotten. Something sealed. Something powerful enough that even humans, the Deathworlders, the apex predators of the galaxy, were afraid of it. The humans slowly lifted their helmets, placing them against their chests in a silent, ancient human gesture of mourning. Lyra realized they weren't saluting. They were apologizing to the universe for what was about to come.